Can't say I remember no Atten. We're back. Trust in the Force is here talking about Skeleton Crew episode 4. Can't say I remember no Atten. I am Vactor. I'm your host. I'm here with Super Tim, the fairest in all the land. Tim, how you doing today?
I can't say I remember no Ad Atten.
And you were saying that to me constantly before this episode, and I was very pleased to see it's the name of the episode. It said if there's a drinking game, every time you take a drink, every time it's said in this episode, you will be drunk by the end of this episode because it is said many a time by Nick Frost. I wonder if he's actually saying it that many times or if they just recorded it once and they're just playing
I
it
could see
over
it.
and over.
I could see it doing both ways. You know,
Yeah.
like he said it once or twice, and then like, well, let's keep looping it and keep doing it. And but I texted you that because that was the name of the title of the episode the first
Yeah.
time. But then when it kept coming up, I had to keep texting it like, can't say I remember no Ad Atten, can't say I remember no Ad Atten. Yeah.
That was great. And this episode was directed by the Daniels, who directed the Oscar award winning Everything Everywhere All at Once. And they did a fantastic job. Let's just get right into it.
Yeah.
Tim, is it possible for this show to get any better on the 4th episode? What are your thoughts on Skeleton Crew? We're almost at this is the halfway point because there's 8 total
Yeah.
episodes.
Yeah.
What do you think of so
I
far?
really liked this episode a lot. It delivered on character. We've been saying this whole time that the characters are really moving the story along, and they really are. And really, my boy Neil took center stage in this episode, and really kind of because he's been kind of the shy one. Because he's fitting that shy kid archetype,
Yeah.
and he really kind of, if I may pull a Harry Potter reference, kind of did a Neville Longbottom,
Yes.
and really stepped up because he's been told this whole episode that, oh well, your kindness is your strength, you need to step up and do the things you need to. And he talked about his story about how his younger brother beat the crap out of him, and he laughed about that, but it was really nice to see him kind of step up, even though he did faint at the end. But it was just such a good episode for my boy Neil, and I've been loving Neil this entire time, from the first time we saw him, in the trailers and even in this episode. He was really great, and I really liked him. And there was lots of cool Star Wars references and deep cuts to things, just like there have been this entire show. But as has been the case, they don't take away from anything. They don't stop the stories. Like, hey, remember this cool thing? And was really neat.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed Neil taking center stage on this episode, and the archetype, like you said, of kind of like the shy kid, the nerdy kid, or the not the intimidated kid, the scaredy cat almost,
Yeah.
and him stepping up this episode. I really like the creature design on Neil, and then that actor who I still he's in that Jack Black Christmas movie, Dear Santa, which I still have not watched yet, but or I haven't finished yet. I started it. Robert Timothy Smith is his name, but I
Oh,
think he's doing a fantastic job as Neil. Just really endearing you to the character, and he even gets like a love arc in this one. It's like they do a whole this episode is like a whole movie for Neil. It's like the arc of his storyline, and he gets a girl and he wins her over and he becomes brave. Like it just feels really good and fitting into that adventure. Like if I was a kid, I think this would be my favorite show. And even though I'm not a kid, it's my favorite show on TV right now. But it's just I feel like it's hitting the sweet spot for action, adventure, mystery, and then it being set in the Star Wars universe is really making it like fit into all of my favorite things. So I'm really enjoying it up to this point, and the mystery specifically in this episode of what are all these other at planets like
yeah.
at Chewie at Chewbacca. I don't know. There's all kind of at planets that they have in this episode, and
Yeah.
what what does it mean? Because when I first saw it, I was like, is this a time travel thing? Are they going either like backwards in time, forwards in time, or is it something where each of these planets was set up to be the exact same, but then the other ones were destroyed, and At Aten was the one that was kind of lost to time? It's very interesting to see where this is going, and I
It's
still
almost like
don't.
maybe if the planets were like an experiment kind of thing,
Yeah,
and like maybe a failed experiment, and
right.
At is the one that worked, and
Yeah.
and obviously there are so many people who are protecting its existence and protecting the pirate captain that preceded Fern, who had SM-33. Who I just like it was yesterday that I yesterday years old that I found out that SM-33 is actually an anagram for Smee.
Oh, I
Um,
thought you knew. I thought we talked about that before.
we may have, but for
Oh
some reason
man.
it escaped my attention,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
was like, "Oh wow, that's cool, that's great."
Yes.
But and obviously SM-33 has been coded to not think about At-Aten, and unless he's instructed not to, because droids, as has been established in the Star Wars universe, are very docile. That's been
Mhm.
established even in the prequels. Lama Su and Tanwi in episode
Mm.
2, Attack of the Clones, say that the clones are extremely docile and superior to droids, who are extremely obedient. And we've we've been seeing like a huge droid presence in this show. A lot, like the droids that are at Aten, teaching the kids, having them be like follow a specific guideline, a specific order, and yeah, and see that this droid, which who I've loved SM-33 this entire time. I found him very funny, very endearing, but when his programming is unlocked and he's like, I'm not um I'm not supposed to tell you, I'm supposed to rip apart anybody who asks about
Mhm.
the treasure. And it reminded me of, we both love Back to the Future. Reminded me of Back to the Future 2, when Biff says, if anyone asks about the almanac, I
Oh,
shoot him. Bam.
that was the
Uh,
first thing I thought of when I was watching.
yeah, yeah, me too, me too. And then when he like stands like so menacing, I was just like, oh dear.
Yeah,
I
because
was
it's like
scared.
I was like, those kids can't stop him. And
No.
it's funny, like Neil was able to like surprise him, but the fact that Jude Law just the conveniently there's a off switch on his back on his thing. I was like, without that, there's no way that they're gonna stop him.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. Where does he go from here? Because okay, as soon as they turn him back on, he's still in kill mode. How do they override? But I guess um is it KB? Who's the Lobot? Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
KB. Yeah, it's
yeah,
KB.
KB. It looks like she has, or she's going to reprogram him or do something to his memory. So maybe that's before he gets turned back on. She's able to go into his memory or something like that. But
Well,
that's really
Fern was
interesting.
the one that was able to kind of say, "Oh, I remember I had," which was a callback to
Yeah, that was great.
of
Yeah.
the like the first or second episode. Like I had to like reconfigure this droid to do this, and so I can do that, and that was kind of a cool thing. That they called back to. And it was really really cool how Fern has been kind of like this take charge girl this entire time, and then when SM-33 goes all rogue, but was it both KB and Nim win
Oh, Wim.
Wim,
Hmm.
they both get behind Fern, like because they've just accepted her into that role, in that leadership role
Right.
as the captain, and
Hmm.
I thought that was a really great moment
Yeah.
for these kids.
And it was great that you see that they are still kids. Like when you see Fern's the way that she reacts to, oh, I'm not going to get to go home. She didn't have that tough exterior anymore. She
Yeah,
broke down, and you feel for these kids. Like this is putting me in that position of like watching high school movies, and then I'm back in high school. Like I'm putting myself in the character's position, and I've
Yeah.
always liked those coming of age stories because no matter what age I am, I'm able to relate to the character and say, "Oh, I remember when I was that age. I remember like what
Hmm.
would I have done in this situation." So I'm enjoying that aspect of it, and still that, as we talked about last week, that Amblin Entertainment vibe of this is like the Goonies style, and there's even like a reference to the Goonies captain in this, which I'm not a huge Goonies fan. It's not one of my favorite '80s movies, but I get
I've
some of
never
the
seen it, so
references.
I mean,
We're not,
I know like the basic plot, and
yeah,
because I'm not dead. Um,
we're not the best Goonies historians to talk to, but it was cool to see that the pirate that was the previous one, the captain before Fern, was kind of similar to what the Goonies, that pirate captain in that movie was. So there's all kind of callbacks to not only Star Wars but also Goonies, Spielberg, Amblin Entertainment. So I love all of those things that they continue to sprinkle throughout, and it just feels like this show just has that solid foundation of they know where they're going. Like I feel like I trust them that they're going to
yeah.
land the ship at the end of these 8 episodes. Like even through all 4 episodes, I felt confident that they knew where they were going, they knew what was going on, and it didn't feel like a, piece by numbers of we're scrambling to see what we're going to do at the end of this show. I feel like they are set and they know what course they're on, so
It
I'm
definitely
in for
feels
it.
like, yeah, I'm in for it too. It definitely feels like there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to this season,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
it's been said that both John Watts and Christopher Ford, who are writing the majority of these episodes. There's only like two they're not writing,
Yeah.
and
Which are the
they
next 2 by circumstance.
oh wow, um, both Christmas and New Year's. Was watching Star Wars Explained today, and
Hmm.
they were like laying out their schedules. Like, yeah, we don't know where our reviews are going to be because next week's episode is on Christmas Eve. Next week's
Hmm.
episode is on New Year's Eve. I'm like, wow, that's weird.
Yeah. These
um,
are tough times for reviewers, as we know firsthand for
yeah,
this
yeah,
show.
but they've talked about how they like have a general idea of where it's going, and also where season two will possibly go.
Nice.
um
Oh man, I hope we get season 2 of
I
Skeleton
hope so
Crew.
too. I hope so too. It's. I remember when we were talking about this show after the Acolyte was over, and we were like, "Well, we don't even know if like we were a little unsure about Skeleton Crew, and like we don't even know if it's going to be a season two, if it's just going to be a one and done." But now we're at the midway point, and we're like, we want more. We want more of this story, and speaking of um, and it's also like what I liked about this episode too is it actually made a comment on something that's been an issue with Star Wars, where I don't remember, I think someone was talking to somebody where they were like talking about like, well, what happens, like are you just going to keep raiding and keep fighting and keep raiding
Hmm.
and keep fighting? And it just kept reminding me of how many wars are we going to get in this Star Wars universe before we finally, I mean, obviously the series is called Star Wars, so obviously we're going to keep getting fighting and stuff, but between the Jedi and the Nile, the Jedi and the Sith, the Empire and the Rebellion, the Resistance and the First Order, the Separatists and the Republic. It's just on and on and on. I mean, where is it going to go after Rise of Skywalker? What's going to be
Yeah.
the next opposing force? And it just really got me thinking. Like, it was a really really cool commentary on the Star Wars galaxy itself,
Yeah,
and
I like that as well.
yeah, it was really cool. Um, and also like seeing, like, even though this episode focused on Neil a lot, we still got a lot of focus on Wim as well, because for this whole show up to this point, Wim has been like, I'm like adventure, excitement. I crave
Hmm.
these things, uh, and he's been craving these things. Reading Jedi stories, reading. I mean, very much like Luke Skywalker, and kind of like find himself thrown into, like you want this you want this adventure, you want this excitement. Here's where it's going to lead you.
Yeah.
and seeing like a place that looks very much like his home, like his school is demolished and used as a training ground for kids. The Seeing the supervisor tower, seeing the park. And you could tell that he's going through these emotions and going through these feelings about, like, do I want this path? Do I want
Hmm.
this? Do I want to go down this area that I'm seeking, or do I just want to go home?
Yeah.
And it's like you were saying, these are still kids at the end of the day, and they're still thinking, I like, because that's all they want to do right now. They just want to go home. They've had enough adventure, I think.
Yeah. And that's what's great about the, like I said, it fits into that typical archetype that a lot of the kids adventure movies have. It's not like we've never seen this before, but if it's one of those things of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, if it is doing it very well, this type of
Yeah.
story, this type of narrative, if you're used to this and you've seen a ton of these, you'll be able to spot and pick out the different the direction that it's going in. But let's say, like, for my son, this might be his first time ever seeing this. He might see this before he sees Goonies, and I think it's
Or even A
continuing
New
on
Hope.
that. Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it. It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying, the host was saying their son or their daughter was getting into Star Wars for the first time, and the first exposure that they had was Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker saga,
Hmm.
and they played through the whole thing. They know all the story points, but that made them want to watch the movies. And the parent was like, "Oh man, I'm so glad I didn't want to force it on them." But they came to it naturally through their own means. And that's what, the way that I came to it. I don't know. I don't think you and I have ever talked about your first viewing of Star Wars. Like,
I
what
don't think so.
was placed in front of you?
Well, it was it was just it was at the video store, and my mom
Ah.
and dad had said, like, oh, just watch this,
Hmm.
and I had seen The Lion King first, um,
Oh
so
wow.
so imagine my shock just to hear Darth Vader talking in the voice of Mufasa, and I'm like, what is
Yes.
going on here?
Yeah.
And I just really gravitated towards it, and then by the time, and this was like just before, um, this is before the special editions came out, and seeing that in the theater for the first time,
Mm,
and then seeing episode one in theaters for the first time was a great experience. My
nice.
brother and I skipped school to see Attack of the Clones, um, and that was a really fun experience for us, and watching that. But yeah, it's seeing, like, being exposed to those movies. But with my son, we have the Disney came out with these. I don't know if you remember the game Disney Infinity.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
so then they came out with figures apart from the game after the game was canceled, called Disney Toy Box figures, and I have all of them.
Nice.
There's a Slave One that I'm looking at right now,
Ah, nice.
um, with with Boba and Mando, and we have all these toys, and he wants, like, let's bring out the Star Wars toys, and we have this, like, big Millennium Falcon, and we have the Razor Crest, and and it's funny because when we have my wife loves Yoda, and so she has a bunch of Yoda stuffies and stuff, and he sees that, and he says Grogu,
Ah, yes, yes,
and
yes.
at first, but then he learned the difference between Yoda and Grogu,
Mm,
and so, like, him being exposed to Star Wars that way, and eventually he'll watch the movies, when he gets to a certain age,
hmm.
and it's amazing because, my nieces, I have a niece who loves Star Wars, and it's funny because when I married my wife, my niece then called me the Star Wars Encyclopedia. Um,
She's right.
that's right. I wear that badge proudly. But but yeah, and her exposure to Star Wars was first The Force Awakens.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
she latched onto Rey when Rogue One came
Mm.
out. She latched onto Jyn Erso,
Nice.
and
Nice.
so like there's all these different exposures. And I was listening to a podcast. I mentioned this before, where someone said that they're exposed to the show Young Sheldon before they're exposed to Big
Oh
Bang
yeah.
Theory.
Right. Right.
And when I heard that, that was just crazy to me.
Yeah.
um like, this is nuts.
Yes.
um
You
and
know,
and
it, it is funny the way that we were raised. Like I remember seeing things that were already out and not going back and watching. Like I think I watched Rocky 5 before I ever saw Rocky 1. And then when it comes time for our kids, I think a lot of us are like, oh, they have to watch it in the order, the chronological order, the release order. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I didn't get it that way.
I
But
saw
it's
Back to
just
the Future 2
interesting.
before I saw Back to the Future 1.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
It's
I
just
watched Back to the Future 2 like a billion times, and I only had like a passing recollection of what happened in part 1 just because of what happened in part 2.
I think
Yeah.
it was like that for me for Ghostbusters. I at least have watched Ghostbusters 90% more than I watched Ghostbusters 2, I'm sorry, than Ghostbusters. I was that was on repeat when I was a kid, and then I don't know, I just never latched on to the first one. But for my Star Wars, real quick, I was similar to you. I was sick from school, and my mom took me to Blockbuster and said, "All right, you can check out a video, and we can watch. You can watch that at home while you're sick." And I just chose the VHS, the trilogy. They were renting out the whole trilogy box set, and this was before the special editions. And I just watched
The
it,
One Last
and I
Time versions.
this was,
Or
yeah,
was that
I think
before
it
that?
was. It was the
Okay.
one that like the box. Oh well, Blockbuster changed the boxes, but anyways, I latched onto that and was like, oh wow, I can watch all three in a row and get the whole story. I didn't have to wait, 9 years, and I was just hooked from that. And I was like, "Oh, Star Wars is better than Star Trek." And from that day forward, it was just always Star Wars for me. So that was not something I don't think my parents planned. It was just, "Hey, go to the video store," and I
Sure.
picked it out and I said, "Hey, this has cool box art." And Luke is, holding the lightsaber, and what is this about? And I knew from pop culture, I already knew Darth Vader was his father. I knew about lightsabers, but to get the whole story and to like see the whole thing, I was like, oh man, this is amazing. So for my son, I think I'm just going to let it happen naturally. Whatever he's watching, the Mando and Grogu movie will probably be out by that time. Maybe that'll be his first exposure to Star Wars, but he's seen us watching Skeleton Crew, but he's not interested. He's playing with his
Right.
cars, he's doing stuff.
Sure, sure,
So
sure.
I think it's going to be
Yeah, like
interesting
I
to
was telling
see.
my son that there's going to be a Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and he's like, "Oh, I want to see that," because he knows that the Mando stuff's mine. Uh, and he's like, "Can I play with the Mandalorian toys?" Like, yeah, sure, that's fine. Uh, um, and
Yes.
can I play with your Mando minifig? For my little micro uh Mando sets that I have for Lego. And but yeah, it's great having our kids kind of discover Star Wars differently. And as nerds, we're like, well, you have to watch A New Hope first, because and there's so many different orders of
Right.
Star Wars and so many different ways you can watch it and things. It's been hotly debated for years, and it's funny that the MCU is kind of entering that territory now.
Yeah. Right.
Whereas, like,
Yep.
what order do you watch it? Do you watch it in chronological order? Do you watch it the way it was released? Do you watch it by trilogy? Do like so many ways that people are discovering, and like they'll watch an Avengers movie. I had a friend who didn't watch Ant-Man, but he saw Civil War, and then that caused him to go back and watch Ant-Man
Yeah.
because they loved Ant-Man and Civil War, and so that's great.
Yes.
But little bit of a tangent, but the I think how are you feeling about Jod right now?
You can tell he's kind of got, he's, I think he's almost going to have like a Han Solo arc
Mm-hmm.
because right now he's all about treasure. He's all about,
Right.
I want to get the treasure. I want to get the reward money for turning in the princess or whatever. And I think by the end of this show, he's gonna have that Han turn to come back and save Luke at the very end.
Sure.
We will be endeared to his character, I think, by the end of it. And so far, Jude Law has just done a great job as an actor. Like his performance
Right.
has really been great. And
And
I,
and the man still looks great after 20 years.
oh yeah, yeah,
I was watching Holiday over the weekend, and he's in that, and I was like, he still sounds the same. He still like looks somewhat the same, and like he still looks great after 20 years. And
yeah,
but yeah, it's interesting. Like he talked about his home planet in this episode,
yes. And I
and
really want to see they like I've said previously, episode 7 which airs January 7th, is supposed to be the one where we get his backstory. That's what Jude Law has said. So I'm
mhm.
really interested to see what is the full backstory. Like, what is the truth? Is he force sensitive? Like, was that just a
Is he a
trick?
Jedi? Because he says, "I never actually said that I was a
Yeah,
Jedi."
because
Um,
he,
I played the previously on before watching this week's episode, and that like when I saw that again, I'm like, oh, that's funny. Like because his delivery is like, I never actually said
yeah,
that.
he could
Um,
still be a Padawan. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean he just didn't complete his training. Like, maybe he started, or is he related to like the Shin Hati and Balin Skull camp? Like, maybe
mhm,
he was training in that side of it, and we don't know. Like at this point,
yeah,
and that's exciting that we're not able to predict where he's going.
yeah,
But
and
I'm
there's like this
interested.
tension. There's this tension between like every time he's on screen, like because he did he stole Wim's um
Those credits.
Republic credits
Hmm.
to buy the Eopies back. But he's like, well, what do you want for your price? I want these kids. And at first you're like, oh, right, he's out for the kids. And then, it's only because he's leading them to whatever this treasure is on Atten. And so like, and between him and SM-33, we don't know who we're supposed to trust.
Right. But
And
I can't, like, can you see him being a bad guy by the end of it? Like, I just can't see.
I can't, but there's like I can't see him being a bad guy, but there's so many unanswered questions. There's so many times where like I want to trust him, but then
Yeah.
there's times where I just can't.
Yeah.
And that's just a credit to the writing that's
Yes.
going on.
Hmm.
It's a credit to Jude Law's performance because
Yep.
he's performed so many different characters across so many different series.
Right.
He was kind of a villain in Captain Marvel. He was Dumbledore in Fantastic Beasts. He's a lovable love interest in the Holiday movie. And
He
so,
was great in AI as the love
oh yeah, yeah,
robot.
yeah, yeah.
That
That's
was the
right. He
one that
was.
I always come back to. But he's proving why you get Jude Law for this role. Like they
Yeah,
can put him on they can market him, they can put him on the billboards and all the posters and stuff, and then he delivers a solid performance. Like there's you can hang your hat on his performance. It's like it's going to be good. Like it's not going to be he's not phoning it in. He's not like, oh, I'm just here for a paycheck. Like I feel like he fits into the Star Wars universe and he cares about this character. You can kind of feel his empathy coming through. So I really am glad that he got cast in this and that
oh yeah,
he 100% is one of the like he's one of the pillars of this show. Like you have the kid actor performances. I think you have Smee as one side of it, and then you have Jude Law. Like there's these three pillars of what's holding this up that we are all invested in this, and it's
mhm.
those three. There's people who love Smee, people who love Jude Law, and the people who love the kids, and then there's like people like us, I think, who love all of them,
Yeah,
and it's just they're carrying this show so far. The mystery is carrying the show, and then that action adventure comedy side of it, like all of these things are
right,
just mixing
right.
together to make it's just fun. Every week I'm tuning
Hmm.
into Skeleton Crew and I'm like, man, this is so much fun. At the end of it, I'm like, oh, I wish it was more. I wish it would keep going because
Right.
I'm having so much fun.
Like we see these episodes are like 30 to 40 minutes long. We're like, oh man, I wish it was longer. I wish we had
Yeah,
more stuff to kind of sink our teeth into. And I think why
yeah.
I liked this episode so much, like I really liked this episode. It was really a great episode. And why I really liked it, because I feel like cause these pillars that you're talking about, the kids, Smee, SM33, and Jude Law, like they've all coalesced now. Like
Yeah.
they're all
They're
here,
a
and
crew.
their crew, and they're all here now, and now we can kind of move forward a little bit with the story, because the first episode was all the kids, second episode was kids and Smee with Jude Law at the end, and episode 3 was kind of acquainting us with Jude Law, but now we're kind of getting into the meat of his performance and the meat of his character and his relationship to the kids. What's gonna happen with SM33? Are like, what are they gonna do? Like, they
There's something in his memory that needs to be unlocked. Like we need
yeah.
to find out more of his previous crew to find, like, to get the full meat of this. And I think there is a there's a betrayal that's still left. I think there's something that's going to happen. Like there's still too much time between now and the end of the show to not have some type of conflict happen where maybe Jude Law betrays them or something, and then he does
Hmm.
the, like, oh, now he was really a good guy the whole time, right? So I think there is something coming in these next couple episodes that we may not like Jude Law by the end of the next episode, but I
Yeah,
think by the
we
end of
still have to
eight,
have our dark all hope is lost moment
right,
in this show.
right, there's
And
still that.
yeah,
Yep.
that for hero's journey aspect.
Yes.
But I'm enjoying Jude Law. I'm enjoying, I mean, the tension between him and the kids, and because like this is one nice shot in where they're walking across across the barren wasteland, and you've got Smee up front, kids in the middle, and Jude Law behind, and kind of like the conflict that's there.
Yeah.
Um,
Because they
one,
still don't fully trust him yet. Like
yeah,
I think once the kids fully, maybe that's when the turn happens. It's like they fully embraced him as part of the crew, and then there's like a little betrayal, and then he comes back. But I still, they're getting to that point, like where they, after what he did on this episode, I think they're getting to the point where they're trusting him. But then they had that little bit of tension with well, how did you get the dataries? Oh, wait, he stole them. So like there's
right,
still that.
right. And one thing I wanted to mention is the kids, not just the kids that are kids, but the kids that were on this planet.
Yeah.
The
Hmm. Was
the
it the Troiks or
the
the
Troiks,
Troikas or something?
their weapons
Yeah, Troiks.
and their armor and their helmets reminded me a lot of the Nile from the High
Mm,
Republic, and
which fits
we
perfectly with the pirate theme of this show.
absolutely, absolutely. And but then you also have the other side, which has a lot of like, there was the tank from episode one.
Yeah. Yes.
uh
I love that. When I
yeah,
turned to my wife when I was watching, I was like, ah, look, it's the droid army.
yeah. And seeing like some of the Imperial weaponry that they had. Yeah, it's just really cool stuff, really great stuff.
Yes. So we
Just
are very much enjoying Skeleton Crew at the halfway point. So far, it is really checking all the boxes for us here at Trust in the Force. I hope it's checking your boxes as well. Love having you here, and we would be honored if you would join us.
Trust only in the Force.